It was a quiet day in the vast space of the Galactic Empire. The Empire had been at peace for many years, and everything seemed to be running smoothly. In the Grand Command Center, the Empire's top officials were focused on their usual tasks. They watched over the galaxy from their powerful command stations, believing that nothing could break their hold on the universe. Suddenly, the calm was shattered. A loud alarm echoed through the halls of the command center. Warning: unknown ship detected. The blaring sound filled the air as red lights flashed everywhere. The officials quickly turned to their monitors, their faces turning pale with fear. A human warship, uninvited and unnoticed, had entered the Empire's space. How did this happen? One officer whispered, his voice shaky. How did they get this close without us detecting them? The human warship had appeared from nowhere. The Empire's sensors had missed it, and now it was dangerously close to the heart of their territory. There was no sign of distress, no sign of a battle. The warship was just there, silent and still, as if waiting for something. General Ishtar, a high-ranking officer of the Empire, quickly stood up from his chair. His mind raced. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. His voice was sharp, but it was clear that even he didn't know what to expect. "I want every ship ready for immediate deployment. We need to know what this human ship wants." The command center burst into action. Officers scrambled to send signals to the fleet, but there was still no response from the warship. It wasn't acting like a normal military ship. It wasn't making any threats or demands. It simply floated there, just outside their most secure systems, as if daring the Empire to make a move. A low hum filled the room as another officer looked at their readings. "General, it's not responding to our signals. It seems like it's just waiting." The tension in the air grew thicker. No one could explain how the human ship had made it so far into Empire space. It wasn't supposed to be possible. The Empire had the best technology in the galaxy. They controlled thousands of planets, each one filled with advanced defense systems. How could a human ship have breached all that? General Ishtar clenched his fists. "This is no ordinary human ship," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and fear. "They must have a plan." "But what is it?" Back on the human ship, the crew remained calm. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were in no rush. Their mission had taken months of careful planning, and now they were finally in the heart of the Galactic Empire's territory. The captain of the human warship, Captain Sinclair, stood on the bridge, staring at the stars outside the window. "We've made it," Captain Sinclair said, his voice steady. "The Empire won't expect us. We're too close for them to react in time. Let's keep our course steady. The Empire is about to learn that humans are no longer to be underestimated." The crew nodded. They had heard the rumors, the stories of the Empire's strength, its power, its control. But the humans were determined to prove that the Empire's dominance would not last forever. Their warship, though small compared to the massive fleets of the Empire, was more advanced than anyone could imagine. It had been designed for this very moment, to slip into the heart of the Empire unnoticed and leave a message. Back in the command center, the panic was growing. More alarms sounded as the human ship came closer to their capital planet. The officers were beginning to understand that the Empire had underestimated the humans. They had made a mistake, one they could not fix easily. "We can't let them get any closer," General Ishtar barked. "Prepare for an immediate strike. Get me every fleet in position." But even as he spoke, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if it was already too late? What if the human ship had already set its plan into motion, and there was nothing the Empire could do to stop it? The time for action was running out, and the Empire was on edge. The human ship, once thought of as a minor threat, was now a giant question mark hanging over their heads. What did the humans want? What were they planning? The answers were still unknown, but one thing was certain: the Galactic Empire had never faced anything like this before. And as the warship continued its silent approach, the question that haunted every officer's mind was clear. Who let a human warship get this close? The command center of the Galactic Empire was in full chaos. Officers rushed to their stations, exchanging frantic orders as the situation rapidly escalated. The Empire had faced countless enemies in the past, but a human warship slipping through their defenses, like this, was something no one had ever prepared for. The crew of the Empire's command center was well trained, but the fear creeping into their voices was undeniable. General Ishtar stood at the front of the room, his eyes glued to the monitors, trying to make sense of what was happening. His hands gripped the edge of the console, his mind racing through possible strategies. Why haven't we detected them before? He muttered, mostly to himself. His question hung in the air, unanswered. A young officer, her voice trembling, spoke up. "General, we've tried all signals, but they aren't responding. The human ship remains silent. It's as if they're waiting for something." The silence in the command center grew even heavier, and General Ishtar's mind began to churn. He knew that silence often meant one of two things. Either an enemy was preparing for something big, or they had already accomplished their goal, and were now simply watching. The latter was a far more unsettling thought. "We cannot afford to wait any longer," he said, finally breaking the tension. His voice was strong, but the unease in his words could not be ignored. "We'll send out a fleet. If they refuse to respond, we will have no choice but to engage." The officers scrambled to follow his orders. The Empire's fleet had always been quick to mobilize, and within moments, a group of warships was preparing to move. But as the fleet moved into position, something strange happened. The human warship, still far off, had not made a move. It didn't react to the Empire's ships approaching it. It just kept its steady course, as if the warships meant nothing to it. "What are they waiting for?" an officer asked, his voice full of frustration. "They can't just stand there." The seconds seemed to stretch into minutes as the warships continued their approach. The tension in the command center was almost unbearable. Officers exchanged nervous glances, wondering if they were about to step into a trap. But nothing prepared them for what happened next. The human warship suddenly shifted. It wasn't a sudden attack or a move to flee. It was a shift in position, as though it were positioning itself deliberately. But even more unsettling, it hadn't fired a single shot. No missiles, no defensive maneuvers. It simply adjusted its path, putting itself in the exact location the Empire fleet didn't want it to be. General Ishtar's heart skipped a beat. This is impossible," he whispered under his breath. On the human ship, Captain Sinclair stood with a calm expression as he watched the displays. He had expected the Empire to react quickly, but he was prepared for it. The ship's technology was far more advanced than the Empire could imagine. And now, the trap was set. "Keep your course steady," Captain Sinclair ordered. "We're not here to fight just yet. We want them to come to us. Let them see the power we've brought." The crew nodded, their faces filled with determination. They had trained for this moment. This was not a simple raid or an invasion. It was something far more calculated. The warship was positioned perfectly, close enough to make the Empire feel threatened, but far enough to avoid immediate retaliation. Back in the Empire's command center, the general's worry grew. Every officer there knew the stakes. The human ship's movement was no longer a surprise. It was a message. The Empire had no control over what was happening. It was becoming painfully clear. The humans were in command now. One of the younger officers turned to General Ishtar. "Should we attack now, sir? We can't just stand by and let them do whatever they want." The general paused, weighing his options. They could send a full strike, but what if the humans were prepared? What if this was part of their plan? The last thing he wanted was to underestimate the humans. After all, they were in their own territory now. "No," General Ishtar said slowly, his voice cold. "We need to understand what they're doing first. Prepare all long-range scanners. I want to know everything about that ship. Every detail. We need to know why they are here and what they want." His orders echoed throughout the room. but no one could shake the unease settling over them. The Empire had been confident for so long, and now the question was lingering in the air. Could they be defeated by a single human warship? Meanwhile, the crew on the human ship continued with their mission. Captain Sinclair's eyes were fixed on the star charts ahead. They were nearly there, the heart of the Empire's domain. The warship had been designed for this kind of operation, a test of their strength against one of the most powerful galactic forces in history. "We're almost at the edge of their most secure systems," Captain Sinclair said, more to himself than to anyone else. "They won't know what hit them." The captain's words were calm, but the crew knew what was at stake. The humans had prepared for every possible outcome, but the success of their mission depended on the Empire's reaction. If they waited too long to make a move, the humans would have the advantage. General Ishtar's thoughts were interrupted by another officer. "General, we're getting reports from the fleet. They are ready to strike. Should we give the order?" The general's mind raced. Time was running out, and every second that passed only raised the stakes. He turned to face the officer, his expression hardened. "No," he said firmly. "We will wait. We need to be sure." But as the human warship remained in position, the question lingered in the back of the general's mind. Was the Empire already too late to stop whatever the humans had planned? The Empire's command center was buzzing with activity. Officers and technicians scurried around the room, working desperately to get information on the human warship that had invaded their space. The screens flickered with endless data, but nothing seemed to make sense. The warship, though small in comparison to the Empire's vast fleets, was still a mystery. General Ishtar stood in front of the large observation window, gazing out at the stars, lost in thought. The more they tried to understand the human ship, the more questions piled up. It had slipped past their defenses without making a sound, and now it was sitting at the edge of their most secure space. The crew aboard the warship had not made any aggressive moves, and yet something about it felt different. It wasn't a typical military ship. The general had a feeling that the humans had been planning something for a long time. "We need more information," General Ishtar said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Send every available probe. I want to know everything about that ship, down to the smallest detail." The officers immediately sprang into action, but even as they worked, doubts began to creep into their minds. How could the Empire have missed such a well-organized threat? How had this warship, likely built by a species still considered primitive by galactic standards, evaded their most advanced technology? Meanwhile, on the human ship, Captain Sinclair was as calm as ever. The crew was performing their duties efficiently, keeping the warship on its course. They had been preparing for this moment for months, and now the time had come to see if their plan would succeed. Captain Sinclair stood at the helm of the ship, his gaze fixed on the ever-approaching Empire. He had a deep understanding of the power the Galactic Empire wielded, but he wasn't afraid. In fact, the more he observed, the more certain he became that this moment would change everything. The crew of the warship worked in perfect harmony, each person knowing exactly what their role was. Every piece of equipment on the ship was working flawlessly, and everything was proceeding according to plan. The warship wasn't just any ship. It was a highly advanced piece of technology, one that had been specifically designed to infiltrate the Empire's space without detection. "We're close enough now," Captain Sinclair said, his voice steady. "We've crossed into their heart. Let's see how long it takes them to react." The bridge crew nodded, their focus unshaken. Every system was in place. The warship was equipped with advanced cloaking technology, communications jamming devices, and a series of defensive measures that could outmatch anything the Empire had. But what made it truly dangerous was its purpose. The human warship wasn't there to start a battle. It wasn't there to conquer. It was there to send a message, one that the Empire would not soon forget. Back in the Empire's command center, the officers were beginning to feel the weight of the situation. Every attempt to gather information on the human ship had failed. They could see it on their scanners, but the details remained unclear. There was something strange about it. something that didn't fit the normal patterns of warfare. The human ship wasn't behaving like an enemy, yet it wasn't a simple diplomatic mission either. It was acting with the precision of a force that knew exactly what it was doing. "We have to consider all possibilities," one of the officers suggested. "Perhaps they've infiltrated our defenses with advanced technology. Maybe this is just the beginning of something much larger." General Ishtar turned to face the officer, his expression hard. "What do you mean by larger? What could they possibly want with us?" The officer hesitated before answering, unsure of how to voice the fear that was creeping into everyone's minds. What if they've come to show us that we're no longer the dominant power in this galaxy? What if this is just the first step in something bigger, something we're not prepared for? The general clenched his fists. The thought that a human ship, a species the Empire had long considered insignificant, could pose such a threat was beyond anything he had ever imagined. But there was no time for doubts now. They had to respond. "Prepare the fleet," General Ishtar said firmly, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I want a full blockade around that ship. We will force them to reveal their intentions. If they refuse to cooperate, we will take action." As the order was relayed to the fleet, the tension in the command center grew even more unbearable. Officers exchanged worried glances. The Empire had never been in this position before. They were always the ones who set the terms, the ones who decided what happened in the galaxy. But now, they were the ones reacting. They were the ones playing catch-up. Meanwhile, Captain Sinclair on the human warship was watching it all unfold. He had expected the Empire to react, but seeing it happen in real time was a different experience. He could feel the power of the situation building. The Galactic Empire, the self-proclaimed rulers of the galaxy, were scrambling, trying to make sense of a threat they couldn't comprehend. "We've got their attention," Sinclair said quietly, a small smile forming on his lips. "Now, let's see how they handle the truth." He knew the Empire would eventually retaliate, but what they didn't know was that the humans had already won. The Empire's confusion and hesitation were signs of their weakness. The warship had been a message, and now the humans were about to send a much bigger one. Back in the command center, General Ishtar's mind was still racing. He had ordered a full blockade, but there was no telling what would happen next. Could they stop the humans in time, or had they already lost control? As the minutes passed, the Empire's sense of certainty began to crumble. This human warship, which had appeared out of nowhere, was slowly revealing just how vulnerable the Empire really was. The stage was set, and the tension between the two forces was thick enough to cut with a knife. Would the Empire find a way to regain control, or had they finally met an enemy they couldn't defeat? The tension was palpable within the walls of the Empire's command center. Officers moved swiftly, their voices filled with a mixture of urgency and fear as they coordinated efforts to understand the strange human warship that had breached their defenses. Every strategy they tried seemed to be met with silence from the enemy ship, and with each passing minute, the weight of uncertainty grew heavier. General Ishtar paced back and forth in front of the large display window, his mind racing with possibilities. He could feel the pressure mounting from every direction. The Empire had always been in control of the galaxy. No one had dared to challenge their dominance in centuries. And now, a lone human warship had found a way to slip past their sensors and make it to the heart of their most secure systems. It was unthinkable. "Why won't they communicate?" General Ishtar muttered, his frustration seeping through his voice. "We've tried every signal, every method of contact. And still, nothing. What are they waiting for?" His officers didn't have an answer. No one did. The situation was slipping further from their grasp, and the more they tried to understand, the less they knew. Meanwhile, on the human warship, Captain Sinclair stood calmly at the helm. His hands rested lightly on the control panel, but his mind was razor-sharp. He could feel the tension of the moment, but he also knew the truth. The Empire was reacting out of fear. They had been caught off guard, and now they were scrambling to regain control. The humans had already won. It was only a matter of time before the Empire realized it. "We've sent our message," Captain Sinclair said quietly, his eyes fixed on the stars outside the viewport. "Now, we wait." The crew of the warship moved with quiet precision, each one aware of their role. They had prepared for this moment for months, and now that the time had come, they were executing their plan flawlessly. The warship wasn't here to start a war. It wasn't even here to fight. It was here to show the Empire something they had never considered. Humanity was no longer a weak species, easily dismissed and overlooked. In the Empire's command center, the growing unease was becoming impossible to ignore. Every officer felt it. They had been so confident, so certain that nothing could challenge them. But now, they were facing something they didn't understand, and that was something the Empire had never dealt with before. General Ishtar turned toward his officers, his voice steady but laced with a sense of urgency. "Prepare a direct communication line. I want to speak with their captain. We can't afford to keep playing games." The officer at the comm station nodded quickly, setting up the necessary connections. But even as the communication link was established, there was a strange hesitation in the room. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, knowing that they had no idea what to expect from the humans. What if the captain had an answer that would shake the very foundation of the Empire? Moments later, the comm screen flickered to life, and the calm face of Captain Sinclair appeared on the display. His eyes met those of General Ishtar, and for a brief moment, there was a quiet, almost eerie stillness between them. "This is Captain Sinclair of the United Earth Forces," the human said, his voice calm and steady. "I assume you are General Ishtar, the leader of the Galactic Empire's defense operations." General Ishtar's grip tightened on the edge of his desk. He had been prepared for this moment, but it still sent a jolt of shock through him. The human was speaking with such confidence, as if he had nothing to fear. There was no arrogance in his tone, just a quiet certainty that seemed almost unnatural. "I am General Ishtar," he replied, his voice firm. "You have violated the territorial boundaries of the Galactic Empire. You are far from home, Captain Sinclair, and you will answer for your actions." Captain Sinclair didn't flinch. "I'm not here to start a war, General. We're here to deliver a message that you've been ignoring for far too long." A brief silence fell between them. General Ishtar's mind raced. A message? What could a single human warship possibly have to say to the mighty Empire? "What is it you think you have to say?" General Ishtar demanded, trying to sound in control despite the growing unease inside him. Captain Sinclair's expression remained unchanged. "We are here to show you that you're not the only ones who can control the galaxy. The days of your unchecked power are over. Humans are no longer a species you can dismiss. We've made our way into the heart of your territory without your knowledge. And now we want you to understand that you can no longer operate with the belief that you hold all the cards. You've underestimated us, and it's time to correct that mistake." The general's face tightened, his jaw clenching. The words the human captain spoke were a direct challenge to everything the Empire stood for. It was unimaginable. He had expected the human warship to be a nuisance, perhaps even an annoyance, but not a bold threat to the very foundation of the Empire. "You think you can change the balance of power?" General Ishtar asked, his voice cold and controlled, though his mind was racing. "You are just one ship. You are nothing compared to the might of the Empire." Captain Sinclair didn't flinch. "One ship is all it takes to show you that your empire is fragile. We've come to prove a point. We could destroy your fleets in an instant, but that's not the goal. We want you to understand that humanity is no longer a weak link. We are capable of much more than you realize." For a moment, neither spoke. The general's mind was spinning. He had underestimated the humans, and now they were in his territory, with full access to his most secure systems. But what if they were right? What if this was only the beginning? What if there was something more to this human ship that he had yet to uncover? "We'll see about that," General Ishtar finally said, his voice low, filled with a dangerous edge. You won't leave here unscathed. The Empire will respond. Captain Sinclair's gaze never wavered. You're welcome to try, General. But know this, your Empire is already changing. The screen went black, and for the first time in years, General Ishtar felt the weight of uncertainty press down on him. The Empire had always been in control. But now, the future felt uncertain, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something far larger was unfolding before him. The Empire's command center was quieter now, the buzz of activity replaced by a sense of tense anticipation. General Ishtar stared at the blank screen, his mind still reeling from the conversation with Captain Sinclair. The audacity of the human had taken him by surprise. The message had been clear, and there was no denying it. Humanity was no longer the small, insignificant species the Empire had once dismissed. They were capable of challenging the might of the Empire. What are we missing? General Ishtar muttered under his breath, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the control panel in front of him. He had been through countless battles, faced the strongest adversaries across the galaxy, and yet this human captain and his ship had him questioning everything he had known about the galaxy's power structure. As he stared at the screen, his officers continued to monitor the situation, their expressions filled with uncertainty. The blockade was ready, the fleet had been deployed, but there was still no sign of aggression from the human ship. It seemed almost too quiet, too controlled. Was this part of their strategy? Or was the Empire truly facing a threat they couldn't predict? I need answers, General Ishtar said sharply, turning to his lead strategist. We cannot remain in the dark. Get me any new intelligence on the human ship, anything we've missed. The strategist nodded and quickly turned back to his console. The room was filled with the sound of typing as officers analyzed every scrap of information they had gathered. The human ship was still there, but it hadn't moved. It hovered just outside their reach, as if daring the Empire to make the next move. And with each passing second, General Ishtar felt his control over the situation slipping further away. We've tried every scanner, every probe, one of the officers said, frustration creeping into his voice. There's no indication of anything out of the ordinary. It's as if the ship is invisible. No energy readings, no signatures. It's like it's not even there. General Ishtar's eyes narrowed. This was impossible. The Empire had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Nothing should be able to slip through their defenses undetected. And yet, the human ship had done just that. It was mocking them, silently drifting just outside their grasp, as if it were a ghost. How can a ship just disappear like that? The general demanded, his patience wearing thin. It has to be using some kind of technology we haven't seen before. How else could it have breached our defenses without a trace? The strategist's voice was steady, though tinged with concern. It's possible, sir, that this ship has advanced cloaking technology far beyond anything we've encountered, perhaps even something we're not equipped to detect. General Ishtar's mind raced. If the human ship was using technology that the Empire couldn't detect, it would explain their sudden appearance. But how had they acquired such advanced technology? The Empire had prided itself on its superiority. And now, this human ship was showing them just how much they had underestimated their enemies. We need to rethink our approach, the general said finally, his voice grim. We can't let this continue. If we allow this human ship to stay here, it will undermine everything we've built. We'll show them that we're still in control. He turned to the officer in charge of communications. Prepare a broadcast for the fleet. I want all ships to surround the human vessel and maintain position. No one leaves until we've determined their intentions. As the officer began to relay the orders, General Ishtar turned back to the strategist. Do we have anything else? Any weaknesses? Anything at all? The strategist hesitated for a moment before speaking. There's something strange, sir. The human ship, although we can't get a clear read on its systems, seems to be transmitting something. A signal, but it's encrypted. We're working on breaking the code, but it's unlike anything we've seen before. "Get me that code," the general snapped. "I don't care what it takes." The minutes dragged by, each one feeling longer than the last. The uncertainty that had crept into the Empire's command center was now palpable. It wasn't just the human ship that had General Ishtar on edge. It was the realization that they were no longer the ones controlling the galaxy. They had built their empire on the idea that they were the supreme power, that no one could challenge them. And yet here they were, reacting to a single human ship, trying to understand a threat they couldn't even fully perceive. On the human warship, Captain Sinclair stood calmly at the bridge, observing the growing tension in the Empire's response. He had expected the Empire to react with force, but this was something else entirely. They were afraid, and that was exactly what he had wanted. His crew moved with quiet precision, as they had done since the beginning of this mission. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Empire's uncertainty was the key to the entire operation. By the time they realized what was truly happening, it would be too late. Captain Sinclair had always known that humanity was capable of greatness. The Empire had tried to ignore them, to treat them as nothing more than a nuisance. But now, humanity was on the verge of showing the galaxy just how powerful they could be. The Empire's power was built on fear and control, and now it was cracking. The human warship was merely the beginning. "We've done our part," Captain Sinclair said, his voice calm. "The rest is up to them." Back in the Empire's command center, the tension continued to mount. General Ishtar's thoughts were consumed with one question: what would the humans do next? It was clear that this wasn't just about one ship. This was about something larger, something that threatened the very foundation of the Empire's power. The human ship, with its mysterious technology and its calm, measured crew, was showing the Empire that they no longer held the upper hand. And the longer they waited, the more they risked losing everything. General Ishtar's thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from the communication console. The officer in charge of communications turned quickly, his eyes wide with surprise. "We've cracked the code, sir," the officer said, his voice tense. "The signal, it's a message. It's from Captain Sinclair." General Ishtar's heart raced. "Put it through." The screen flickered to life again, this time showing the calm face of Captain Sinclair. He didn't speak at first, just stared into the camera, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You've had your warning, General," Captain Sinclair said. "The galaxy is changing. The Empire is no longer in control. We've shown you that humanity is not what you thought. The next step is yours. Will you acknowledge the truth, or will you continue to ignore it?" The screen went dark once again, leaving General Ishtar to confront the chilling reality. The human message was clear, and it was a challenge the Empire couldn't ignore. The next move was theirs to make, but whatever it was, it would change everything. General Ishtar stood at the center of the command room, the quiet hum of the control panels around him doing little to ease the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. The Empire had always been a fortress, unshakable, secure. But now, standing on the brink of something unknown, he couldn't escape the nagging feeling that everything was about to change. The message from Captain Sinclair had left an imprint, a question that reverberated in his mind. What if the Empire is no longer the dominant force in the galaxy? He turned to face his officers, each one tense, their eyes trained on their consoles, but with the same underlying anxiety that he felt. They were all wondering the same thing. What would the Empire do next? It was no longer a question of defeating a single ship. It was about how to respond to this challenge, to this subtle revelation that the Empire's dominance was not as absolute as it once seemed. "Report," General Ishtar ordered, his voice carrying the weight of his growing concerns. The officer at the communication station hesitated, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, the human ship has sent another signal. It's much stronger this time. They've activated some kind of energy field, but we can't make sense of it. It's unlike anything we've encountered before." A chill ran down Ishtar's spine. The Empire's superiority was rooted in its advanced technology, but now Humanity seemed to be playing a game they hadn't anticipated, one where their usual methods of control were no longer effective. "Anything else?" Ishtar asked, his voice betraying a flicker of impatience. "We've managed to isolate part of the signal," the officer continued. "It appears to be a form of communication, but it's not in any language we know. It's a pattern, almost like a code." A long silence followed. General Ishtar's mind was working quickly, but the pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting. The humans, it seemed, had an advantage that the Empire had never prepared for, an ability to communicate and operate in ways that defied expectation. What was their next move? "Gather all our analysts," he said at last. "I want this code deciphered, and I want it done now." His officers scrambled into action, some already on their comms, others reaching for the necessary equipment. But in that moment, General Ishtar felt a rare pang of doubt. The human ship had not only infiltrated their defenses, but had now forced them into a game where they didn't understand the rules. It was unsettling. At the same time, aboard the human warship, Captain Sinclair stood in front of the war table, his hands clasped behind his back. The calm exterior he maintained was a reflection of the confidence coursing through him. He knew the Empire was watching, analyzing, trying to decode everything. It was exactly what he wanted. His crew moved with disciplined efficiency, responding to the signals, running diagnostics, ensuring everything was running smoothly. Despite the gravity of the situation, there was a sense of calm, as if they were merely waiting for the Empire to make its next misstep. They had come here with a purpose, and the time was drawing near for the next step in their plan. Sinclair turned to his communications officer. "Any updates?" The officer shook his head, but there was a flicker of anticipation in her eyes. "The Empire's fleet is forming up. It looks like they're preparing for something big. But they haven't made any move yet. They're waiting." Captain Sinclair nodded slowly. The Empire's hesitation was exactly what he had hoped for. They were uncertain. The human ship had already shaken their confidence. Now, the time had come to push further. "We're not here to provoke a war," Sinclair said quietly, though the fire in his eyes was unmistakable. "But we need them to understand that the galaxy is no longer their playground. We will not be passive. We will not let them continue their reign without challenge." He turned toward the large viewport, staring out into the vast expanse of stars. The silence of space was all-encompassing, yet it was a silence that held weight. Everything was building toward this moment, and there was no turning back now. The Empire would either bend to the new reality, or it would resist. Inevitably, it would face the consequences of that resistance. Back in the Empire's command center, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Officers continued their work, but every glance, every movement, felt like it carried the weight of a decision that had yet to be made. The fleet had been assembled. The blockade was in place. It was time to act. General Ishtar stared at the massive screen in front of him. The human ship still floated calmly, unmoved, unyielding. His mind churned, analyzing the possibilities, but there was no clear answer. For all their might, the Empire was faced with a simple, terrifying truth. The galaxy was no longer theirs to command. And then the report came through. The code had been cracked. General Ishtar's breath caught as he read the translation. "We are the future of the galaxy. Your empire is over." It was a bold message, one that threatened the very core of the Empire's existence. A declaration of humanity's intentions, but it was more than just a warning. It was a challenge, a demand for recognition that the Empire could not ignore. He turned to his officers, his expression hardening. "Prepare the fleet. We will respond to this insolence. But be aware, this is not just about the ship anymore. It's about proving the Empire's strength in the face of this new threat." As the order was given, the fleet began to move, positioning itself around the human warship. The Empire would not bend. It would not be cowed by the challenge of a single ship, no matter how advanced or cunning. But even as the Empire prepared for its next move, a question lingered in the air. Was the fleet's might enough to suppress this new force, or had the Empire already lost its place at the top? Captain Sinclair, on his ship, watched as the Empire's fleet moved into position. He felt the tension in the air, but his mind remained clear. The battle was not yet won, but the game had changed. He was ready for whatever came next. The message had been sent, and now the galaxy would have to face the new reality.